Hi, everyone. I am so excited because today I'm going to be talking to you about how do you know if you are operating at the next level or just doing more work? How do you know that it's time for you to get promoted, whether it's internally or externally? So, a lot of senior professionals tell me I'm already doing the next level job. Sometimes they're absolutely right, but sometimes when we examine the evidence, they are not operating at a higher level. They are doing a much larger volume of the work they were already doing. And that distinction matters because effort does not determine seniority. So the thing is, organizational level is inferred based on the magnitude, complexity, and consequence of the problems that you are trusted to solve. And today, based on working with over 1,000 professionals, jump 2 levels up. I've had people who jump 2 levels up, more than a level up. I'm going to share with you a practical assessment for determining whether your scope has actually increased or whether your company has simply made you the most dependable person in an overloaded system. So here's a framework that I am going to give you. It is called the 7 dimensions of senior level scope. So the first one is the magnitude of your decision making. Here's the thing. If you are operating at a lower level, then the way you would be describing the scope of the work that you do is by coordinating activities, tracking delivery, reporting risks, implementing decisions that are made by someone else. If you are operating at an executive level, director, VP, and above, then you need to be deciding which problems deserve investment. If you're not part of that decision making, then you're not operating at that level yet, and your company is not giving you that opportunity to operate at that level. The other thing that you need to demonstrate is the ability to make trade-offs across competing priorities, recommending whether work should continue, shaping the directions others will execute. So here's a question for you. Are you simply reporting on decisions, or are you influencing decisions and owning those decisions? If the answer to the question is I am simply reporting on these decisions, then you're not operating at the next level. You're not operating at a director or VP level. If the answer is that you are owning those decisions, then you are operating at the next level, right? And sometimes you may be a director or VP, but you don't feel like you have enough ownership. And that's an indication that if you feel that you want to take more of that ownership, that you should be targeting the next level. Okay, so here's the other thing. The second thing that I want you to be aware of is ambiguity. Are you given a defined problem to execute, or are you expected to determine what the real problem is? Do you create the path when no path exists? Because seniority increases when the organization trusts your judgment before the answer is known. Okay? So if you're not in that position where you're trusted with handling ambiguity and where the organization trusts your judgment, that is a gap. And that is something that you need to fix by being at the right level. Okay. Now, the third thing that I want you to think about is the consequence. I want you to ask yourself, what happens if your decision is wrong? What revenue, customers, employees, risk, or strategic commitments are affected? Is the impact local or enterprise-wide? That's what actually going to help you articulate your value. By being able to talk about the consequences of what you do, the ambiguity that you take on, and then your decision making basically magnitude. So if you are in a role where you decide which problems deserve investment, you are driving the priorities based on trade-offs, you're recommending whether work should continue. If you are in a position where you are given a defined, or sorry, you're expected to determine what the real problem is, and you know that you are responsible for the consequences of what happens if the decisions are wrong, that's a lot of value. And you need to be sharing that in order to position yourself to the next level, regardless of whether you have the title or not. The next thing that you want to articulate is your cross-functional influence. I want you to ask yourself, are you coordinating people who already agree, or are you aligning leaders with competing incentives? Are you influencing peers, executives, customers, or partners without direct authority? If the answer is yes, and you're not being given the correct compensation or the title, then again, you need to seriously think about finding an environment that would actually place you at the right level, because you're leaving money, on the table. And the other thing is you need to be aware of this in order to make yourself more marketable. The fifth thing, resource ownership. Do you determine how people, money, or time should be allocated? Do you build the business case? Can you stop low-value work? Can you redirect investment? Systems and leverage. Ask yourself, does the work become easier because of you, or does the organization simply send more work to you? Have you built capability in others? Have you reduced dependence on your personal intervention? If every critical problem still requires you personally, you may be indispensable, but not necessarily promotable. Here's the thing. You may check all of these boxes. You may check the box of, your decisions have a high altitude. You can deal with ambiguity. The consequences are things that you own. You have cross-functional influence. But if you are not being well compensated for that level of responsibility and you're not being recognized, that is frustrating. And it's also possible, on the other hand, that you may not have the opportunity to do some of these things because the organization is not placing you at the right level. They're not giving you the authority and autonomy to be able to execute at that level, even though you're capable. And that's a different problem, but really the solution is the same. You need to figure out an exit strategy, because what is the point of being in something or being in a situation that doesn't value your potential, right? How are you going to grow your career if you're not being given opportunities to build that business case, to stop low value work, to redirect investment? How are you going to make the impact that you want to make if the organization simply sends more work to you and doesn't give you the opportunity to build capability in others, right? So if every critical problem still requires you personally, but you are not being promoted, that's also a red flag. The other thing I wanted to ask is, do leaders know the business consequence of your work? Because if they don't, then all they're going to see is that you are busy, dependable, and helpful, but not necessarily that they are not going to be able to succeed without you. And so the thing is, when you talk about your work in language, like I ran the weekly program meeting and coordinated several teams, versus I established the decision structure that aligned product engineering, operations, and sales around a recovery plan for a critical customer commitment. When you don't frame it like the latter, of course you're going to be undervalued. And the problem that I see with a lot of leaders is that they are not able to articulate their value in a structured way. They're not able to articulate their value in an impactful way. And they're not necessarily aware of the criteria that they need to align to in order to sound as a true senior executive. And this is where my framework comes in. I established the decision structure that aligned product engineering, operations, and sales around a recovery plan for a critical customer commitment. Maybe you retained a 10 million customer, right? So being able to tie what you do to the ROI and the organizational objectives. So here's an exercise that I'm going to share with you all. And I would focus it on one initiative. I want you to think of one initiative that you worked on at an organization. Maybe it's something that you're working on right now. Maybe it's something that you worked on in the past. And I want you to answer these questions. What was happening before you became involved in this program? What was the state of the program before you became involved? What was at risk and the reason that you took on and owned that initiative? What decision, direction, or system did you create? Who did you influence? What trade-offs did you navigate? What changed after you led that initiative? And what would likely have happened without your intervention? So when I ask these questions to my clients and we look at every single initiative that they worked on, it really helps them build the case of why they should get promoted internally, or what it might actually do is allow external organizations who do not have a lot of context in terms of what they do understand their value. Here's the thing. The cost of not getting promoted, gosh, I mean, it's a lot more than just you not getting promoted. When I see clients who stay in the same role when they've outgrown their level, especially if it's been over a year that you feel stagnant, what happens to you is that you turn into a fixer rather than a strategic owner. Your title falls behind your scope. Your compensation becomes anchored at a lower level. It becomes very difficult to increase your salary because, as we know, they're gonna increase it by a small percentage versus increasing it based on the level that you should be at, right? You also lose opportunities to build the experiences the external market expects. And then eventually you end up struggling to describe the work that you do because you've attached your identity to that level. You've been brainwashed to believe that this is the level you belong in because the organization refuses to promote you. And that in the long term affects your confidence. It affects the way you're perceived by the market, and it makes it even more difficult for you to increase your salary in the long run because, cost of living, we know that it's increasing. And on top of that, you've already been overdue. You've already been overdue for a promotion. So it's almost like you're 2 steps behind if you don't fix this, right? The longer you perform invisible, unclassified work, the easier it becomes for everyone, including you, to underestimate what it represents. So if you are listening to this and you are carrying more responsibility but cannot tell whether it constitutes director, VP, or executive level scope. That is exactly what I diagnose, and I encourage you to book a career diagnosis. Look, I'm not for everyone. I don't work with people who are just, just want to collect a paycheck and they're not interested in growing their career. If you're that kind of person who's not ambitious and you don't want to grow your career, or maybe you are in a life situation where you don't want to move up, that's totally fine. I'm not for everyone. I'm only focused on helping people who are very ambitious and get demotivated when they're not working at their highest potential. I'm only for people who have come to terms that enough is enough and they need to do something about it. They know in their heart that they are competitive. They know that they deserve to be at top-notch organizations. I've helped people land at companies like Meta, Amazon, big tech organizations, top tier organizations. If you believe that you are a top tier individual, but maybe just because of the way that you express your value, maybe the circumstances of your organization, you're not being seen as top tier, then this is where my career diagnosis comes in. So here's how to book the career diagnosis. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to share my screen to show you how to do this, how to book. So let us see here, share screen. There we go. Okie dokie. So very simple. Click on the button, book an appointment, and notice how I say high performing leader. I only work with high performing leaders. If you don't feel like you are a high performing leader and you don't deserve a promotion, then please don't book a call with me. Maybe there are things that you need to work on and you need to improve on, and that's not what I specialize in. What I specialize in is taking people who are already high performing and possibly undervalued or misperceived. Those are the people that I work with, and I help you reposition yourself so that either your organization internally realizes that they're being stupid and they're not promoting you, or we package you so that someone on the outside who doesn't know you sees your value immediately and understands that you are a true match for their organization. So if you are that person and you are done being undervalued, obviously you're not obsessed about just making money. You actually care. You actually want to create an impact. Obviously, the compensation comes hand in hand with you making an impact because we're not, volunteering at a charity here. We have bills to pay. We deserve to be recognized, right? So if you are that person, I encourage you to listen to this 10-minute video where I share my story and some stories of clients like you who have moved up from individual contributor to director, from director to VP. I even have VP to C level. Book the career diagnosis so that we can chat. You click on this button and then choose what is, your situation to help me understand your goal and what you're trying to achieve, because we're only going to have 15 minutes and I want to do my due diligence. I want to understand what you're trying to solve so that we can go deeper on the call. And if it makes sense, then we can talk about the possibility of us working together. Either way, you get a bit more clarity in terms of your problem and what's blocking you. A lot of people have shared with me that getting on these career diagnosis calls has helped them a lot. Okay, so that is it for now. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable and if there's a certain topic that you want me to also talk about, then feel free to share that with me. But if you have found this valuable, I would appreciate it if you give it a like. This will help me know if this was something that resonated with you. It also helps this video get seen by people who really need this advice. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful night.